that have 4 times our population. Do we need to fix that? We
That's a very important point.
under
And along those same lines, just really quickly, Jim, your book is called Unequal Justice and everything like that. So, what would you do in your mind or philosophically if you could wave a magic wand to give us equal justice? Because the book is called Unequal Justice, and you're talking about the ways that things have been unfair, whether that's against a certain group, because we do know that minorities are uh, in prison at a greater rate, at least that's the statistics that I've heard, than the other parts of society. And that doesn't mean that they are committing a greater amount of crimes. It just means that sometimes they don't have the access to the resources for good lawyers like yourself and all along those lines. So I just wondering, what would you do to make it a more just legal system?
Yeah, that's a huge issue, and I wish I could say I answer that question in the book about how to fix the system, because it's not a quick, easy answer. You know, it's really systemic. There's a lot of problems inherent within the system, whether we talk about judges or prosecutors or defense attorneys, the level of competence that they have, the level of experience that they have, and whether they're motivated to respect someone's individual constitutional rights or not. And that goes to prosecutors, judges, and even defense attorneys, aggressively fighting or representing someone. That's a mission that you have. It's part of your ethical responsibilities, is to take on a case and to fight for your client if you're a defense attorney in that venue. And I unfortunately have seen too many situations where defense attorneys just cave to the prosecution because they don't want to fight. And, it does require a level of passion and drive. And not everyone's made up like that, quite frankly. And then you have judges, in fact, that are appointed in New Jersey, were appointed by governors in other states. They're elected. So you can get into a whole conversation about whether you should be elected or appointed. Well, there was an old expression back in the day, Alexander Hamilton, I believe, to the victor goes the spoils. And that means that those that get put in those positions of power get the right to make those appointments. Well, that's the same in New Jersey. It's very similar to the president gets to appoint people in these positions. Not always the most qualified people are appointed, but then you run an election where people are running for these offices and they have to raise funds. They have to raise campaign dollars because it's expensive to run a campaign, even for local judges in certain, municipalities or wherever. And then they're beholden to these people that have donated money to them. So they may have conflicts of interest along the way. So I can't tell you one system is better than the other, but to answer your question, how can we really make changes? I think the idea of blind justice is a better idea, and it's something that I didn't coin this, but maybe we have the accused is not even in the courtroom, so that the jury does not know who that individual is. They don't get to look at them and make a predetermination that somebody looks like they're guilty or not guilty. It's kind of contrary to our system, because yes, we should be in the courtroom and have the ability to see and participate. And maybe there's a way to do that in the future where these people are separated out and they're not in a courtroom, so that there isn't a predisposition to find somebody guilty or have a feeling or a notion. And that's very hard to do, because when you select a jury in the jury selection process, people come in with their life experience and they have predetermined notions about crime, about punishment, and they may not answer questions truthfully when the judge asks questions or the attorney asks questions in voir dire regarding their ability to serve as a juror. They may not be honest. And, that's like having a Trojan horse in the jury, and they might very well affect the outcome of a case.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jim, just along that same line and everything, do you think we've got too caught up in celebrity justice and all along those lines? I mean, we had a very famous case here, that being the Mike Peterson case, where he was accused of and convicted of killing his wife and all along those lines. And that became the the premise, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, of the movie Staircase and all along those lines, but it was definitely a celebrity case and all along those lines. So I just wanted, and even as I think about that, Bill Cosby was a celebrity case. So we become too caught up in celebrity justice.
Well, I mean, that when you have a celebrity on trial, it's almost, I don't want to say it's impossible for them to be given the benefit of the rights that they have, but I think there's a certain sense of awe that potential jurors may have when that person is sitting in a courtroom. Our system is for everyone. It's not, there's a system for you and there's a system for me and there's a system for a celebrity. And what is the level of a celebrity? What makes someone a celebrity? How many viewers they have, or how much do they make a movie? I don't know the answer to that. Everybody has their own individual celebrity status, I guess, at some point. And if they've been in one movie versus 10 movies, So, I did a lot of commentary as a TV legal analyst. And a couple of the cases I did was Phil Spector, who was a big record producer back in the day, who murdered a woman. And then I also was involved in the Robert Blake case. I was involved in the O.J. Simpson, doing commentary about that. I was involved in Michael Jackson as well. So, they all had celebrity status and individually brought that to the table, but you can't separate that out. So, it comes with the process of selecting a jury and certainly getting people to commit to upholding their oath that they take. It's different, though. I do agree with you that it's probably the perception of having a celebrity sitting in a courtroom is very different than just Joe Citizen. It's got to be very different. Diddy, had that kind of presence in a courtroom. So certainly people, they may like that person, they may dislike that person. So Alec Baldwin just experienced that in the shooting on the set of the movie. And ultimately he was acquitted, I believe. So, it's hard to separate it out because, ultimately they're just human beings. We're all human beings, and the law is designed for all of us. It's not like you get one set of rules if you're this person, or you get another set of rules if you're that person. I see that Rick had his hand up, and I'm sorry I didn't.
So you touched on this. How do you seat a jury? 50 years ago, everybody got most of their idea of what was going on from friends and family and community. But now we get our ideas of what's going on in America from depending on which flavor of news we watch, whether it's Fox or MSNBC, and they have very different points of view. Or your social media is calculated to feed you what you like. So how do you get a jury that isn't crazy?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question and really interesting, Rick, because, back in the day, when I was a young prosecutor, one of the questions on the voir dire for prospective jurors was, do you have any bumper stickers on your car? Because that would tell a lot about a person. If you say, hey, I'm for the NRA or coexist, or so you could get a flavor for how somebody's political views were, and you'd have to read. And then one of the other questions was, what news? How do you get your news? Where's your news source? So if somebody said Fox News, you'd say, well, they're conservative. If somebody said CNN, you'd say they're liberal. So you would try to make a determination in your mind: is that this a case where I want somebody with a very I want a liberal-minded person, or do I want a conservative-minded person? So, it's a great question, because with the phone today and the advent of technology, we have, we get algorithms and they feed you those things, and it's almost like poisoning the mind. You can't be open-minded because you're just constantly every day looking at the same things. And it's almost like an indoctrination. And it's very hard to separate that out and to get people to be honest about that. when they're being asked questions as a prospective juror, they may not always be honest. They might want to hide that, in that setting, maybe not talk about it. And it makes it extremely difficult and challenging. So there are new challenges today that did not exist, like you say, 50 years ago. This is a big deal. It really is. And it's not really being talked about much, but it is a big deal. Just like having attorneys that are experienced trying cases, because I think it's going to be, 10 years from now, we might not have attorneys standing on their feet in front of a jury convincing them about the merits of their case, whether they're prosecuting or defending, or whether they're civil attorneys, representing a plaintiff or a defendant, because it's not really something that is being utilized. I mean, you see with the way cases are settled or plea bargains are made, there's really a reduction in the number of trials because the system couldn't, quite frankly, accommodate trials every day in every case. It would break. The system would just fall apart. And, we're seeing more and more of that. And the class I teach at Seton Hall Law School is advocacy and persuasion, which really is the dichotomy of a trial. It's really talking about how do you do an opening statement to a jury? How do you introduce evidence? How do you do direct examination, cross-examination? How do you do an effective summation? That's something I didn't even learn in law school, nearly 40 years ago. That's not something that was taught to us. And I say to these students, I say, you're head and shoulders above me, because this is something that I was never given any instruction on. Basically, you pass the bar exam and you're on your own. That's it. If you don't get a clerkship for a judge, or you don't do an internship with a firm, you're kind of lost. You just have to figure it out on your own.
Jim, it's interesting you say that, and I'm hoping Nick will come on screen and everything like that, because I see he's in the background. He's one of the founders of the network and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your take on the legal system, and not just the legal system as it is, but the education. Because part of the reason that Pod TV was founded was because Nick and Kim were frustrated by what wasn't being taught, and also what wasn't being taught in grad school, whether that was law school or medical school, and all along those lines. And I know fiscal literacy was one of them. They said that they didn't have any idea how to maybe even deal with finances. And I don't know if you had any idea when you first started your law practice, but I was just wondering, what is your thoughts around our legal system and how it's being constructed?
Well, you're absolutely correct about that. You're not really given any instruction about how to be a lawyer. You might learn about the law. You might learn about case precedents. You might learn what cases were noteworthy and got in the books that, our justices of the Supreme Court or appellate court, district court judges decided that were, precedent cases that were, moving the needle or supporting or not a certain constitutional amendment. But yeah, they don't teach you how to be a lawyer in law school. They really, you learn law, but and you learn how to think like a lawyer. That is to be able to articulate from both sides your position. That's what you learn in law school. You don't learn how to run a practice. You don't learn how to go to court. You don't learn any of those things. Those are things you have to learn on your own. And, it's really based on the exposure that you have either to individuals or, whether it's a clerkship with a judge or perhaps you're working with an experienced attorney who's been there, who's done that. And that makes a world of difference. And not everybody has those opportunities.
Nick, what's your take on that? You're a lawyer and everything like that, so you're definitely in the legal field. And I brought you a lawyer that's got all kinds of rich experience and everything like that. Oh, you got that Mickey Mouse voice. You might have to go back out and in. You got to adjust your voice.
So is AI changing, while Nick's doing that, is AI changing the educational landscape? Like that you can have AI write a brief for you, but AI might make up cases. Get you.
Oh, this is just you doing the landscape.
Yeah. AI is a big deal these days, and really, I think it's in its infancy in law because we really aren't that tuned in to what it can do. And there are courses right now that are being offered to instruct attorneys how you can utilize AI effectively in your practice and do your research with AI. But what we're finding is lazy attorneys are actually writing briefs through AI, and they're being sanctioned by judges and admonished and even facing ethical implications because they're submitting briefs, claiming that they did the legal research when in fact AI did it, and they're not really fact checking it, and they're not looking at the cases and finding out that these cases never really even happened. They aren't like back in the day when we were in law school and had to shepherdize cases, which was, go to a book and see if the case was overturned. But what's happening, and there's been a rash of these happening throughout the country, where attorneys are relying on AI to write briefs and do legal research and submitting those to the court. And, some judges are astute enough to double or triple check and find out that these are not even accurate citations of law or recitations of law, and that these briefs really aren't worth the paper they were written on.
That makes sense. Hey, Nick, you're back and everything. So what's your take?
Does my voice work now, Max?
There you are, Nick. We can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, what he's saying is exactly correct. The thing is, the attorneys submit briefs through AI. AI is not fact-check and not right. Then the judge gets a hold of it, and the judge relies very heavily off the research of the lawyers. When they fact-check it, they find out they haven't done, and then they end up sanctioning the lawyers, who are basically what James said is correct. They're lazy, and they won't go research to make sure that when they run things through AI that it's absolutely correct. Now, what I do is I work in a very narrow area of the law. I work in qualified plans, and that's it. So what happens is that yesterday I had a meeting. Somebody said, do you do 831B captives? I said, no. I said, I work in this little area, and then that's it. So like when it comes to other areas, like he works in criminal law, I don't know anything about it. Somebody comes to me with a criminal case. I said, you should go find a good lawyer, because I like to work in a very narrow area as opposed to be a jack of all trades, and frankly, mastering none. And today it's so complex, it's really hard to do it. So the amount of criminal cases I've handled in 41 years was one. And what it was actually a tax case. And it was a settlement with the service that never even got to trial, where the person didn't pay taxes on their Swiss bank accounts. And that was it. And it was a criminal settlement. But other than that, did I ever go to court in 41 years? No, not for criminal.
Nick and Jim, just really quickly along those same lines, if you talk to people that are in the legal profession, particularly our young lawyers, they automatically want to go to what I call the glamour part of law, and it's not Jim. It's not criminal law and everything like that. It's usually sports and entertainment law.
It's a lot of work.
So what's your take on that?
They're watching too much TV.
They want to go into
There
sports.
is no glamour. This is work. This is work, and you're taking out the trash 90% of the time. Okay, so the thing is, what you're doing as law is you are a trash man, and you're taking out the trash of the human being, and you're delivering it or trying to tidy it up and get rid of it. Hollywood just makes it look like some glamour profession, but it isn't. It's frankly a lot of work, and if you're doing adversarial work, it's even worse. So the thing is, I try to stay away from adversarial. I do forms.
No, I got what you're saying, Nick, but I just want to hear
from you. There's nothing glamorous about
one last time as well and everything like that. But what is your take on this notion that a lot of times if you ask people that are in law school, they want to go into sports law, they want to go into entertainment law, and they want to go into corporate law. Those are the big three that I hear people say all the time, less about the
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they say. I used to teach law school as an adjunct. It doesn't matter what they say. What matters is what job they get. So what they want to do and what their job they're going to get could be two different things. So they go, I want to be a sports lawyer. Really? Do you? Okay, great. But they never got a job in it, so they won't be a sports attorney. They will be an attorney for what the demand is. So, and law school kind of, and James is right, they don't teach you anything, unfortunately, about how to open up a practice, what it is to work with a client, how to bill a client, how to collect from a client, how to engage with a client, how to even go to court. A lot of them right now, they're moving more toward experimental law where people are getting that practice. But when I went to law school, we took real estate law and no one showed you how to do a real estate closing. I'm serious. I'm going like,
right.
Because what the demand is, hey, I got this piece of property I want to buy. Can you do my real estate closing? I read a lot of case law on real estate, but I have no clue what to do. Okay. That's the reality of it, you know. So and you spend 3 years of that, and after I actually spent 4 because I got a master's, but after 4 years and all these degrees, I only took one class that actually I used, and that was a pension class back in 1983. That's it. So, you know, you learn a lot of interesting stuff, but 80 to 90% of it you'll never use.
Right. So my wife and I watch a lot of. Hold on, let me before we run out of time. My wife and I watch a lot of liberal media, so we're freaked out about stuff in general in the U.S. And then I complain on shows like this and on Twitter and stuff. And my wife says, "What are you going to do if you get arrested?" Which is kind of a liberal overreaction to the current situation. But my question to you is, what if it wasn't? What would I do if I got arrested for like political opinion? What's the first step?
First step is say, I'd like to talk to my attorney.
How do you get? But like,
I'm serious. You don't say anything. Come on, Rick. Let's get smart.
No, but we've got cousin Ken, who, you know, he's a lawyer, but he's just a random lawyer. How do you get a good lawyer for your situation?
You better have one before you get involved in a situation like that. You should all have attorneys. Even when I'm in Spain here, I hire attorneys all the time. I hired a real estate attorney. I have a tax attorney. I'm a tax attorney. I hire a tax attorney for my income taxes. I hire attorneys for our litigation. Every time I run into a specialty, I hire an attorney. So like if you say, hey, I'm going to go protest, which potentially is criminal, you better have your criminal attorney lined up already. And then what happens the minute the police officer says, I'd like to talk to you, give them the attorney's card and exercise your Fifth Amendment. Say absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said. And Rick, what I would say is that the problem that people often have is they think that they're going to convince the officer, they're going to have a legal argument and discussion with the police officer about their rights. And you're not going to win that argument. You're just not going to win. You're better off taking your argument to the court. And what Nick said is so true. Don't say anything. Just say, look, I'd like to exercise my Fifth Amendment rights. And then you do need to get a good, competent, capable attorney. And it does require sometimes doing a little bit of research to find out who is going to be a good advocate for you and who's going to be able to fight for you because so many people hold themselves out as being perhaps criminal defense attorneys, and they don't do a very good job of it, sadly.
Yeah. Exercise the Fifth Amendment right. Keep your mouth shut, because most criminal people convict themselves because they'll say stupid things. Then exercise your Sixth Amendment right. Ask for your right to counsel. Get a lawyer, and then move from there. And everybody, they don't teach you this in any school. First thing you should do is to make sure you have a friendly attorney that you can trust to refer these cases to. So I have a stack of them, literally, that I refer to depending on what cases that come into our office in the company I work with, because not to be prepared like this is insanity. And I've seen as people go through life, they don't even think about that. In other words, if you go protest, okay, because I've heard, like people say, do you ever protest? I never protest. So you won't see me on a picket line or protest line. But let's say Mark likes to protest and maybe Sasha does all that stuff. First thing you should do, line up your criminal attorney. Better have him right there, take his card. And then next thing, remember the Fifth and Sixth Amendment.
Well, most protesters that I know, Nick, just really quickly, most protesters I know have a lawyer on hand, and they also have their bail already set as well. That's why a lot of protest groups have bail funds and all along those lines, because that's actually part of the protest mentality. Just really quickly, because we're already a little bit over time and everything like that, but I've thoroughly enjoyed having Jim on here. I don't know if Sasha or Sharif had any quick questions for him and everything along those lines. And then I definitely wanted him to, if they don't have questions, to give the context of the book, how the book can be obtained, and also how he can be reached as well, because you've definitely given us a lot of insight on this particular edition. So I don't know if I think Sasha may have already disappeared, but do you have any comments, Dr. Sharif, and everything along those lines? If not, I'd love to hear Jim's final parting words as to how he can be reached and about the book.
You have to unmute.
Yeah, you have to unmute if you got questions.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting discussion. I learned a lot from today's discussion. Especially, I am from lawyers' family. My father was lawyer. He died in 2017. My uncle, right now, he is a president of Supreme Court Lawyers Association, Bangladesh. So, but unfortunately, I moved to this academia. But some point, I asked Nick how I can join in this lawyers' family, or how I can develop my career as a lawyer. Right now, I am academician. So Nick actually give me an exam advice and all of the things. So my questions to you, how you want to advise the young peoples who want to develop their career as a lawyer uh, in a simplest way, how you want to advise the young generations.
So, in other words, what advice would you give to folks who want to be a lawyer?
Sure. Well, and there was a time when you had to study a certain thing or be a major, major in something in college. And today it's pretty wide open. You can pretty much major in anything. And, I certainly had that in law school, where I actually had a psychiatrist from Bellevue on one side of me, and I had a heart surgeon from Boston General on the other side of me. And to talk about being intimidated, I was thinking I really didn't belong in this place, but they were doing exactly what I was doing. They were in their first year of law school, but just to expose yourself to as much as you can, because I agree with what Nick said, or maybe Rick said. I don't know who said it, but certainly it's not what it's cracked up to be on television. But you need to get exposure to it, and certainly look at and explore the possibilities of where you want to go and what you want to do. And there's so much that's out there in the law. There's so many different areas. It's like medicine these days. It's specialized, where you may do one thing very well and you don't do anything at all, which is what Nick had talked about. And that's exactly what I did. I was a criminal attorney, but I didn't always just want to be a criminal attorney. And I did a lot of real estate closings over the years, just because I was exposed to that at one point and I had the opportunity to do those things. But, being an attorney that can do all things, that's kind of a thing. You're kind of a bit of a dinosaur these days, to be able to wear all those different hats and, maybe do a closing one day and do a criminal case another day, and prepare somebody's estate planning on another day. It's very difficult and challenging to do that. And that's really not what we do these days.
That makes sense and everything. If you can tell folks how they can get a copy of your book. And by the way, I know that Nick would probably tell you this as well. We've had a program here for a number of years called The Lawyer's Den, so we might have to get you back on that at some point. And it's actually lawyers from around the country that bring up different lawyers' cases. And there's also I think there's a quarterly show called Supreme Court Review here on Pod TV, and that's with a young lady that's a lawyer out of Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. So there are a couple of legal shows that are here on Pod TV, so we might have to get you to come on.
I'd love to come back. I appreciate that. And the name of the book is Unequal Justice: The Search for Truth to Balance the Scales. And it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I do have a website devoted to the book, www.unequal-justice.com. And certainly I'm easy enough to find. If you were just to do a search of my name, there's a Justice with Porfido site as well. So I'm pretty easy to locate, pretty easy to find. And the book, from what I understand, I've read it myself a few times, and certainly I did the narration of it recently. It's a pretty easy read. It's not complicated. I didn't write it for lawyers. It was written for the masses, let's say, to read and to relate to cases and people. And what I say is that I didn't really write the book. The book kind of wrote itself, through the experiences and the people.
Well, we greatly appreciate you being on and everything like that. We're going to get on out of here. We've got other shows that'll be coming on later on this evening, including World Politics and, of course, Coco McMillan. It has a music show and all along those lines. So it's been great having you on, Jim, and hopefully we'll have you back on some other shows as well as this one in the not too distant future. But definitely enjoyed our conversation and enjoyed the insight that you gave us into the legal field.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity. And thank you to all the guests and to Rick and to Nick and to everybody that was on. And I appreciate it.
No problem.